Hi, today I'm here to welcome you to a presentation on early childhood education, leading practices in facility design. And today we're going to talk about why facilities matter in the early childhood education space. We're going to talk about leading practices in design that we see in this space. And we're going to talk about sources of funding and the phases of the facility project that you should expect if you're going through this. First, I want to start with a little bit about who I am and where I work at IFF. IFF is a nonprofit that supports nonprofits at the nexus of facilities and financing. We do that by providing lending in the nonprofit space, including early childhood education. We provide real estate consulting and have been doing real estate support for early childhood education centers who are planning and executing real estate projects for over 30 years now, and supporting them with finding the money, with hiring architects and contractors, with executing those projects, and with working with their community. We also do research in the early childhood space, including identify needs, access, and where the biggest gaps are in order to direct funding and resources to those communities, and by being an advocate and supporting with public policy in that space. So we're really excited to be here. IFF has financed over 140 early childcare projects, creating over 5,000 childcare spots to date. And we like to bring the work that we do, including expertise that exists across the early childcare space, into the actual day-to-day facility work of it, including sharing that information with other organizations who are about to embark or maybe in facility projects right now. Today's focus is really on, what are smaller ways that you can bring best practices of design to your project. So I'm not going to be focused so much on how to design a state-of-the-art new childcare center, and more on what are strategic ways that you can make improvements that could be in the short term and intermediate term, and thinking about how you're doing your day-to-day maintenance for a center and how you can be bringing in some best practice design into your day-to-day maintenance for your facility projects, and take opportunities to really bring quality to your classrooms, and thinking about the operations and the efficiency and how people are being supported by the facility spaces that they're in to do their work. So that improves outcomes for the children who are in the spaces, for the staff who are working in them, for families and caregivers who are also benefiting from those services, and the other administrative staff that might be accessing those spaces. So I'm Kate Sorga. I'm the managing director for IFF's Real Estate Solutions. I'm based in the Chicago Metro office, and I've been with IFF for 15 years. I have been working with early child care centers from the feasibility planning stage. How do you vision a project, to executing both small and large centers. And I'm really excited to bring that experience that I've had in working with early child care centers to talk today about some of the best practices in design. So first, I really want to start with why facilities matter. I think that when we think about children being in childcare spaces, oftentimes long hours, many days, full day, full year care, that those spaces are really important. Sometimes we hear about the facility, the space, the classroom being the third teacher in the space, the environment, and what do children experience in that environment. And so really thinking about the five senses, right? Sound, smell, sight, and touch, and how facility design connects to how young children are learning about their senses. So they're experiencing things that they touch, they pick up, they touch the windows, they touch the walls, they touch the materials in the room, and their ability to access those spaces. How does that promote independence? Thinking about sight and what we learn through our eyes and vision, what we see out the windows, what we see in the room, what we see with the children we're sitting next to and the other teachers in the space. Smelling, we're going to talk a little bit today about quality of air quality. So those smells and odors that might be in the room, and what the importance of having fresh air and well-ventilated spaces are. And sound, we're in spaces these all day, and it can be a little overwhelming if you're in spaces that don't manage sounds well. They can feel very noisy when you want to have quiet time. That when you're in a space, in a classroom for a long period of time, that you want to be able to activate in different ways throughout the day. So that means nap time, lunch time, quiet time, up and moving around time, and how you design your facilities allows you to be more flexible in how you program those spaces. So all of these, thinking about the classroom and how we experience those spaces, both unconsciously or subconsciously, just being in the space, and also really explicitly by looking around what we see in the space. So we're going to kind of organize stuff today around 7 areas, starting with temperature and air, and the temperature of the room and how that affects how we feel, the quality of the air and how that affects student performance. We'll talk about room colors and how they support focus and participation in the room, the importance of having access to daylight and what that impact is on learning, ventilation and how ventilation controls odors and can reduce illness for both children and the staff who are in those spaces, outdoor spaces. We're going to talk just kind of overall about the importance of facility quality and how that lifts overall program quality. And it can boost the return on the investment. It can inspire teachers, it reflects family dignity. It encourages families to enroll their children in those spaces and to stick with those spaces and come every day. And then also noise and, why reduced noise can reduce stress levels and improve attendance and behavior outcomes. So as I said, my goal today is we're going to talk about indoor spaces and outdoor spaces. And if you're going through this presentation, really think about the spaces that you work in and what are a couple of things that are pain points right now that might be a challenge where your facility might not be supporting the operations as people move through the space and operate them in day to day. What are opportunities? Maybe the spaces are working well, but they could work better. And so my hope is that you walk out of here with a couple of things that you could apply in the intermediate or the immediate future to make improvements in your spaces. So first, we're going to start with talking about just general design goals that support leading practices, including welcoming spaces, the layout of the spaces, and the comfort, how you feel in those spaces. So before I really get into some of the details, I want to start with the importance of universal design. So universal design means that it's a design where it's usable by all people to the greatest extent with the least amount of adaptation needed. So this means that if someone's coming in with a wheelchair, with mobility devices, with a stroller, that all of those could be opportunities that the space is not a barrier to them being able to move through the space, to being able to access materials in the space, to being able to get the things that they need, whether that's materials off the shelf, whether that's finding the bathroom, and that the more independence that we have for all users of space, that's a good outcome for everyone. So instead of designing specifically for we're going to make the space wheelchair adaptable, that we're going to say the space is going to be universally designed and accessible by all users of the space. And so you'll see as you go through here how we're really thinking about designing these spaces for the largest population with the least number of barriers possible. So first is thinking about creating a welcoming space, right? We want people to feel good. You come to childcare centers, almost every day of the week. It's a routine, and you want that routine to be comfortable, to be easy to navigate. And that starts with really thinking about how your space is. So stop and take a moment to think about walking into your space and how that might feel to someone who's new to it, someone who's coming day to day, thinking about the staff versus the caregiver versus the child and how they might experience that space. Really thinking about someone who might be walking into it and what they feel. And that starts with thinking about how we connect with nature, paint colors, as well as finishes and acoustics, lighting, both natural lighting as well as the artificial lighting that's in the space, and what I'm going to call a visual clutter and how we organize the space. So first is connecting to nature. Having nature in our spaces can increase attendance, reduce stress, it can improve the behavior, and it can improve focus. So these are all great things. It may sometimes feel like bringing nature into a classroom is inaccessible, but really want to think about what are small ways that we can do that if some of those larger ways might be a little bit prohibitive or might require a bigger construction project. And this starts with this picture right here, which is that we have plants in the classroom. And they have these usually up on a shelf. And in this case, they've brought those plants down on the floor and the kids are using paper towels to dust them. So this is, the children really interacting, touching, feeling the plants. They're taking care of the plants. So they're responsible for thinking about whether it needs water. They're learning about how plants grow, access to sunlight and access to water, and why plants might be thriving. And so this is a relatively easy way that you can bring nature into the classroom. That's something that is movable around what the programming is in that space. I'm also going to talk about paint colors and finishes. So we learn so much about a space through visual communication. So colors are how we help make sense of an environment, and many times we experience them subconsciously. So the colors in a space might give us a feeling or an emotion that we might not even be identifying with. And so here's kind of a color palette, and it talks about some of the emotions that we associate with these different colors. I also want to remind people that there's a wide range of yellow colors. And so those different hues of it, brighter, lighter, yellows and greens and blues also are going to have some influence in how we feel. But we think about green being this feeling of nature, healing, freshness, and quality. We think about white spaces, clean, simple, innocent, honest. And we think about red being exciting, strength, love, energy. A lot of times historically we've seen that early childhood classrooms often have primary colors front center. So we see bright red, orange, yellow, blue spaces, and that being in those spaces all day long can be a little overwhelming. If you think about dropping off children in the morning and picking at the end of the day, 5 days a week, those colors are really present that whole time. And so we're sending that message that whole time. There's not a way to kind of turn it on, turn it off, turn it up, or turn it down. That those really bright colors are something that can really affect the feeling. There's, we see a lot of red when we go to fast food restaurants. It makes us hungry. Is that a space, that a childcare space you want to have bright red energy in it? That means that it might be hard to really dim the energy when we want to have lower points of the day where we're calming the body down and preparing for nap time or for other activities, focusing, reading, quiet time. So here's an example of a classroom that really has green as a dominant color. I love green in childcare spaces, but we have green chairs, we have green floor, we have green walls. And when I look at the space, it almost feels to me like the ceiling's green. So there's so much green color being reflected and bouncing around this space that what I miss is some of the materials. So we see pushed against the wall, we have bookshelves, and the books in the bookshelf kind of get lost in this colors of green everywhere, and the materials on the shelf. I'm going to show you the same classroom. This is after a renovation, and they made some changes in the color. So this is the before, and here we have the after, the same room. And so we still have green used here, but it's switched from being kind of the dominant paint palette to being accent colors. And so we have a green carpet, 2 green accent carpets in different corners of the room. I also want to call out that we've brought in some nature design. With one of the carpets has a leaf design. So we've brought in elements of nature with that leaf design. And when I look in this space, the books on the shelf, pop right now. I'm as a child, I think about walking into this space, I would be so much more drawn to going up to that bookcase and wanting to pick up one of those books and look at it versus the previous room where the green was really overwhelming my senses. Same thing if you look around at the shelves. So we have a neutral palette now with the wood shelves, and we have a wood flooring, neutral palette. I notice the windows in this space a lot more with the daylight coming in, and I see the cups on the table with the colors, the crayons in them. I see the materials on the shelf, and it makes me want to go and want to pick those up and to play with those versus the other space. Here's another example. So we have much more neutral palette. We still have some accent colors here. So the bright kind of red-orange scarf in the back corner of the room, is really exciting. It's something that would be very easy to change. You could have a different colored scarf and really change the energy of that space very quickly for a low dollar amount because you have this neutral palette. Again, the wood floorings, you have some green accent on one wall, but it's much less of a bright green. And we have the plant in the background. So again, calling attention to how we brought in nature with the plant on the blue shelf. And then we'll talk later about lighting, but just want to call attention to that kind of lighting that drops down with elements of nature. It almost looks like a cloud lighting that we have. Sometimes it can be really good to have some color in spaces and bring energy. And this is a lobby reception area of a space. And we see the different colors of green here and blue on the back wall. I love that the blue on the back wall is almost flowing like water and energy, sends it around the corner. And so this could be really helpful if you want to move people through the space, get them back to the classrooms for a drop off, for example. We have the yellow colored floor tiles that are popping, and it really kind of sends the message that you should be, active and moving through this space, which can be really helpful for a lobby space. Again, the kind of wave design on this front desk also sends an energy of movement through it. And I want to call attention to that we have these large hallways that are really accessible and provide spaces for movement, so larger classrooms that may be moving through this space. Again, another good space. This is a gross motor room, so this would be used for activities for a class. And I heard from the operator that they often use these floor tiles to organize movement for the children. So they might say line up on the blue line. They might say jump down the yellow floor tiles. And so here we have the yellow really kind of organizing movement in this space. We have the yellow accent wall, which provides some nice energy in this room. So this is a space that the children are only in for a period of time during the day, not all day long. And so it can feel great to get into the space and kind of send the message that it's okay to move in here. It's okay to be running around. It's okay to be jumping. But this is what this room is for. I also just want to call out again nature. So we see out the window that we can see what season it is right now, right? Right away, I know that it's probably going to be spring or summer. There's leaves in the trees. They haven't turned colors in the fall. And I can see what the weather's like. It's not snowing or raining today. And so all of these opportunities to see outside really cue the child into seasons, into daily weather patterns, into thinking about, how we describe our world and how the weather makes us feel and what's happening inside your space, even if you can't always be outside. Talk about the importance of noise here in this space and how that makes us feel. So this is showing different kinds of acoustic panels. So acoustic panels can reduce the noise and echo in spaces. So sometimes we have rooms where the noise almost appears to bounce around the walls, and it can make it feel very noisy and a little overwhelming for someone who's in that space all day. And so on the right side, we see that there is a wall panel on the left side, that kind of rectangle that you see stick out. That is absorbing the noise in that space. And so that can create a much calmer, quieter space for when children are all talking and active and moving. On the left side, the large colors on the ceiling, those again are noise, going to be absorbing the noise in that space and helping keep that space from feeling a little overwhelming. That can really help with certain children who might feel really overwhelmed in a loud space and have a hard time focusing on the work that they're doing. Let's look at the importance of bathrooms. So we mentioned universal design at the beginning. We really want to have a barrier-free entry. What does that mean? That there's no step or bump that a staff person would need to go over in order to get into the bathroom. We want to have low toilets that are accessible for the child. This is really important for toilet learning, for allowing them to be as independent as possible, as early as possible. We'd like to have roll under sinks and grab bars next to the toilets, motion activated faucets, and we don't want to see the high powered air dryers that we see on the right picture with the red X over them. So these are finishes that provide a quality experience for everyone who's using them. And we'll talk about artificial and natural lighting now. So I love the picture on the right side, right? We have a window, and with the child there is really experiencing the light coming in through this. This is a space that's below grade. So what we're looking at into is like a window well. So you might feel like in a basement that you don't have an opportunity to bring in daylight. And here we've shown that with this window well, we're able to bring daylight even into a space that's below grade. And I just love to see how this child's experiencing the weather, right? We can see the raindrops on the window, and the child is entranced, really just like watching the light pay off the water drops and probably thinking about the water drops running down the window and how much learning and experiential information that child is absorbing through that space. On the left side, we see some of the artificial lighting. And so thinking about how if you don't have daylight, or even if you do have daylight, that artificial lighting is also a really important way to think about how your spaces look and feel. So we know that poor lighting impacts a child's ability to focus, and it can lead to poor learning performance. So there's a lot of research that shows that cool white fluorescent bulbs, which is pretty much what we think about in our classroom spaces, cause bodily stress, cause anxiety, can increase hyperactivity and attention problems, and other things that lead to poor learning performance. right? Sometimes we can do something about that and sometimes we can't. Here's an example of a space that has fluorescent lighting, and yet we found other ways to address the lighting situation, even though we couldn't replace all the fluorescent lighting. So I want to call attention to, we have borrowed light through the windows on the right side of the wall. So we're pulling light in from other spaces. On the back wall, we have daylight. So they replaced a glass door. I'll talk about in a couple of slides later with that used to be a solid door. So there wasn't any daylight coming in. Now we've replaced it with a glass door so we can pull in daylight. And the other thing I love in this picture is what I call task lighting. So underneath the cabinetry in the middle, that middle space is like a diaper changing station. So underneath the cabinetry, we have task lighting. So this allows that, say it's nap time and you don't want to turn all the lights on, that you can turn on that task lighting to do a diaper change. You're going to have a teacher be working in a space even if the rest of the space is dimmed. And I've been in so many childcare spaces where there's one light switch that controls the whole room. And so either the whole room is on or the whole room is off. Even worse, I've been in spaces where there's divided into multiple classrooms and they're all in one large space with dividers up and they're all in one light switch, right? So then you have like 3 or 4 rooms where they all have to be lit or all have to be turned off, and that can make it really hard to control light levels in individual spaces in that room. So remembering that you can add task lighting to be able to control lighting in certain areas and to control the activity level that's happening there, that can have a big impact on students' behavior and mood. Also important to think about window shades. We're talking here a lot about the importance of daylighting, but I recognize that when you have windows that sometimes you don't want bright light, like it can be a really sunny, hot day, and it might be too much to have all that coming into a space. And so thinking about window shades and how you can control it. So there's different kind of filtering that we can use for window shades. Some right here you see, we can still see what's happening outside. We see that there's a playground outside and we can see kind of what the weather is and the light level outside, but the room isn't really overwhelmingly bright and it's probably not going to heat up because that can affect the temperature control and how you comfortably feel in the space. But you can also get blackout shades that darken a room for nap time. So if you're really wanting to make the space very dark. So just thinking about what you're looking for in your window shades. I know that operators sometimes are concerned about safety of those spaces. You have children, you have to be careful about the how you open and close those. But we've worked with operators to really find some window shades that can be successful for them. So looking at that. And here we're going to talk about borrowed light. So, we have some classrooms where you may not have a room that can open up a window to the outside to bring in daylight. And so if that's the case for your situation, thinking about ways that you can borrow light from another space. So here the space used to have no windows and we've added 2 windows. One is in the door. So we replace a solid door with one that has a glass window in it. And so even though that glass window may not feel really big, it's still bringing in some borrowed light from outside. And then in the back wall, we have the long rectangular window, and that's also borrowing light from another hallway. And so we still be able to bring in some daylight in this space, which might have felt a little bit claustrophobic. It's a big classroom, but it's really amazing how adding those window features can change the energy of those spaces. Another example I mentioned earlier, we talked about changing out a solid door with a glass door. It can be a relatively low cost way to bring in daylight into your space and see kind of what's happening outside your room. Children can really enjoy looking out those windows. If you have any concerns kind of about security, I want to remind people like the shades, there's other ways besides window shades that you can kind of block some of the views. So you can have kind of gels, filters that you stick, like stickers that you put up on your windows so that you're able to see out, but it minimizes what people can see inside. Or other ways that you can kind of filter the light through those kind of gel stickers. Here's a great example of natural light. The space that we're looking into is a courtyard space. So it's actually shared between 2 classrooms. And so they've, maybe not possible if you're working with an existing situation, but for this center was able to eliminate some of their classroom space indoors by changing some of it to this courtyard space. And you see all this wonderful natural light coming in, how deep it gets into this classroom that, all the way back from where you see the photographer taking this picture, you can really feel the natural light energy. Also in the bathroom space, so they have those windows kind of bringing the natural light in. Again, I'm going to call attention to biophilic design, nature. So we have a shelf here that has elements from nature. So we have pine cones and other things, found objects outside, feathers, that kind of thing that the children can experience. And so thinking again that nature doesn't always have to be something that's really expensive or requires a redesign of your classroom, that there's small ways that you can bring in nature into your experience. Talk about visual clutter. So decreasing clutter really has positive impacts on learning. So here's a Carnegie Mellon University study that found that children in heavily decorated classrooms were more distracted, spent more time off task, and demonstrated smaller learning gains than when the decorations were moved. In this space, I like this picture here because we have an example of how cabinetry is used in the space. And so that allows the teacher to pull materials out of the shelf and put them in the cabinets behind. They're very accessible. They don't have to, go down the hall and find a storage closet and sort through things. We also have in the cabinetry some places where we can exhibit some of the materials, but they're off above the ground. Again, calling attention to the cabinetry is lifted off the ground, so it's not going all the way down to the floor, which can be, allow for some potential movement down there of space. And just like looking around, the space feels really, clean and easy for children to be able to move through that space. This next space is kind of an example of like what happens when you have clutter. And, I recognize that a lot of operators experience clutter because, the individual classroom teachers might feel like they're not sure when they're going to get more materials. They don't have good places to put them. They don't have time to rotate them out. And so really thinking about the operation side of how you can create spaces so that teachers are comfortable with pulling stuff out of the classroom and knowing that it's going to be available and they can find it at a later date. So that they don't feel the pressure to kind of always have it out and around. Really important to that is furniture, right? So storage solutions that people are more comfortable putting things away when they know that they have a place to put them and know that they can find them later. And so having appropriate furniture for that. Talk about layout. So layout talks about the configuration of your classroom, accessibility, and really thinking about the child and how they experience the layout in that space, as well as the caregivers in that space, and how they can enhance both the caregiver and the child experience. So a layout that supports the program is inclusive, has elements it's going to be efficient and safe. We want to look for a layout that doesn't create blind spots for the caregivers who are using that space. It can, the layout can help define areas based on activities. We really want to find layouts that promote child independence. They can use a sink, they can find materials, they can use the toilet, and eliminates physical barriers. So how do we remove a step up, for example, and create spaces that have ramps? So this is an example of a classroom here where we have a ramp on the side, and that allows people to move through that space. Good layouts have flexible ways that we can program them. And, examples here show this, again, a close-up of this ramp that I just talked about. I also like the storage solution here where it's showing how we have some places that we can put materials up off the floor here. And so this allows everyone to use it in the same way. There's not a different path that someone has to choose. Other students can choose the other path, but everyone's using this ramp. As I also think about this is kind of used as a gross motor area here in the room, and how much fun it would be for children to roll things down the ramp and experience that. That these can be design elements that really around like the operations and the use of the space. On the right side, we've created pathways that are accessible and easy to maintain, and thinking about how we use this as in our space. So I'm going to show again a before and after. I'm going to start to go into our before and after slides. This is a space that was, originally had no access to natural light. It had a large storage room at the back. You can see the door open right now into that storage space. There was really no defined spaces in here, and there was no direct egress. It means you couldn't get out directly to like a playground. And so what can we do with this kind of space? So we're going to show here's the before and here's the after. So we've created a smaller storage area. Instead of the storage area running the whole length of the back of the room, we've created a smaller storage area in the corner, and that blue line that you see is a window outside. And so we've created a way for natural light into the space. We've added another window on the right side with a glass door that goes out to the playground. So we have a direct way for the children to be able to access the playground. And we've added an interior window. I talked about borrowed light earlier. And then we've helped define the space a little bit more by adding this teacher area, like a diaper changing station in the middle, that helps kind of break up the space and creates defined classrooms. So this does reduce the storage in the space, but it helped the teacher maintain the student count by sharing it for the teacher space. And really want to highlight how important the windows here are in creating energy in the space. Here's an example of the same space that I was just describing and what the picture of it looks like. So we can see the windows in the space. We can see the smaller storage room. We can see the teacher area in the middle with the diaper changing station and how that functions to break up the spaces. So really, again, I want to emphasize the children and how they experience those spaces. And so thinking about child scale, what spaces are designed that are just for their size are really inviting for children. So on the right side, we have the box where the child can crawl into, bring a book, and sit there and feel like they have an area of retreat or refuge. These spaces can really inspire wonder and imagination. They're very flexible. One day they're an ice cream shop, and the next day they're a grocery store, and the following day they're a doctor's office. So small changes in those spaces can really change how the child experiences them. So the middle space is really flexible space. And they're spaces that have materials that are accessible. So the child isn't waiting for a teacher to provide materials for them. They're able to access the space. They're able to pick a book off the bookshelf. They're able to pick up a doll and use the doll to move here's the light table on the left side to be able to experience what's going on into that room. More examples of how we can create spaces at the child scale. On the left side, we have some unit blocks and other wood materials that are on some raised stairs. And this is right outside the classroom. This is a Reggio Emilia program. And so they actually use some of the hallway space to be able to break into smaller groups and have children be able to come out here and use kind of an annex for their classroom space. And those wall dividers can really create this cozy, special space for children. In the middle, we see the lowered lighting. So that comes down and creates almost like a library, reading nook area for the children to feel really cozy and comfortable in. And same thing on the right side, we have, again, the lowered lighting. Again, kind of looking at how they've used paint and accent colors here in the space to create kind of the energy here. And we've had this little kind of like reading table space for children to be able to want to feel comfortable in. Here's examples of the children's scale at sinks. And so we have sinks that are designed at the child height. We have cabinetry that's low. We're showing off artwork at the child's height and the child's scale, able to move the chairs and other materials around, get what they need in this space. This really, as I said, promotes independence and building skills for the child to be able to do those tasks independently. I'm going to switch gears now and talk a little bit about comfort. So you're going to see here indoor environmental quality. Sometimes we call that IEQ. You've probably heard of IQ and you've heard of EQ, but maybe you haven't heard of IEQ. Indoor environmental quality is really talking about the quality of what's happening inside. So that connects to our health, the well-being of those who are occupying those spaces. So what we're mostly talking here is about temperature, about humidity, and about ventilation. So individual temperature control can improve productivity because we all are most productive at different temperatures. And I think this is also important as we think about buildings that sometimes we have a thermal control that varies from one classroom to another and can vary during the day, especially based on building conditions. I know my child is in a school where in the morning it's too hot and in the afternoon it's too cold. And so as a parent, I've been asked to send extra layers. So the children are having to adjust with more or less layers depending on the time of day it is. And, while we can all get used to things like that, what if we didn't need to? Really having spaces that we feel comfortable without having to think about how we add or reduce layers is really the optimal way to have spaces. In the middle, we talk about humidity. So humidity lower than 25 to 30% can cause breathing passages to become uncomfortably dry. And it's really important. It can make children more susceptible to viral infections such as the common cold. So this is, with COVID and the pandemic, we're all very worried about wellness and the health of people. And so, we're going to think about how we can improve the humidity levels. So you don't want to have spaces that are too dry, and you don't want to have spaces that are too moist. That can lead to mold and other issues. And so how we can have the right level of humidity in a space. The last is ventilation. So proper ventilation is crucial to controlling odors and helping prevent the spread of disease among children. So we want to think about ways that we can bring in fresh air. One of the easiest ways that you can do this is by having operable windows and being able to open up a window to bring in fresh air in a space. A lot of times we're seeing this is becoming less and less common that people have operable windows, but I really love to see them in childcare spaces where possible. So what are some ways that we can improve indoor environmental quality? So we can open windows during temperate weather. So that means when it's not too hot or too cold, and we can bring in fresh air. Other ways that we can do that is that we can have an air purifier to clean contaminants from the air. We can use a humidifier to introduce moisture into the air. And we can have an essential oil diffuser, which can also introduce moisture in addition to bringing in calming and soothing scents. So I'm going to show some before and after examples of ways that we've made classroom improvements and kind of call your attention to what I think are some of the most interesting things that happen in these before and after pictures. So on the left side, we have the before, and on the right side, we have the after. And so some of the things that we see here is that we had a small window for egress, and that we've increased the size of that window and allowing more natural light to come in. We've improved the operations and the design, the aesthetic of the stairs that go up to that window. And we've improved the storage solutions to be able to kind of manage the clutter. And then the last is calling attention to the flooring. So we have a natural wood flooring with a green accent carpet that has some elements of nature in it. And we have a green plant feature by the stairs, so bringing in some natural elements there as well. Here we've done some lighting improvements and also looked at ways to manage the clutter here. So the windows have pretty much stayed the same, that there's no changes to those window features. The main change is on the left side, we see a single bare light bulb in the ceiling that's really creating a lot of glare. And in the after on the right side, we've done recessed lighting. So we have 4 light fixtures that are recessed up into the ceiling, and the look and feel of that space is much more energizing. So I really look at what's in there. This is the other one where we have some noise barriers, so the noise panel on the wall, and we've created some good storage solutions to be able to reduce some of the clutter in the space. Here's a before and after of a renovation for a project. So on the left side, we see a large space that had windows around the wall, but they weren't running floor to ceiling. And after the renovation, we're bringing in so much natural light to create this wonderful classroom space. There's a big step in the middle, right? So that's really an accessible barrier issue. And so they managed that by creating the ramp down in the space. And while they're doing that, they've also allowed to kind of break up the space into this front area for more gross motor activities and a back area with more center activities for the children to move around. We have again, the light fixtures that I want to call out, so the recessed light fixtures on the ceiling. And we have the windows on the right side. So that's creating borrowed light for the room inside, so that they're not walling it up, so that you're not able to see the light that's coming in this classroom into the other interior classrooms in the space as well. All All right, let's switch gears. We're going to talk about outdoor spaces for a while. So I think a lot of us kind of know why we like outdoor spaces, but just to kind of name it, outdoor spaces are great to increase physical activity, reduce stress. They can enhance creativity, make us more aware of being an environmental steward and taking care of our planet Earth. They can reduce ADHD symptoms and enhance self-regulation. So we think about outdoor spaces oftentimes as playground features and what kind of playground elements they have. We're going to look at some natural outdoor spaces and think about how we can bring in some of those features. A lot of times they are affordable. They can be relatively easy to maintain. And some of the features I like about nature play outside is that they can help teach self-regulation skills, help with communication and coping skills, and help with appropriate risk-taking. Many of us are worried about playground features and the fall zones and safety hazards that we might have with those playground features. And so some of these nature play areas are able to bring in some risky play without some of the concerns that we have about playground features with the fall zones. So here, what are we talking about with outdoor spaces? Everything from on the left side, the raised garden beds, to having a water feature here in the middle. We have music elements in the top right. On the bottom, we talk about shade structures, which we'll talk about in a minute. And on the right side, we have, again, universal design, a feature that's able to be used by all sorts of individuals with the dirt and being able to kind of have this sensory messy play experience. It's really important to think about shade structures in your outdoor spaces. Shade structures really extend your ability to use those spaces to days where it might be too sunny and too bright outside, to days where it might be a little rainy or wet, and you could be outside if you had a shade structure. So, a really important element to having your outdoor spaces. So this shows kind of different ways that you can do some shade on your outdoor spaces. And here we have the before and after of our outdoor spaces. So on the left side, we have, again, kind of these like plastic playground features, and look what we've done on the right side. So we've created the wood chip area with a paved path kind of in the middle. So we have kind of what I call tree cookies, which is like slices of a tree trunk that you can jump and step between, practicing balance, jumping off of them. We have some rocks, similar kind of risky play that children are able to use with those spaces. We have a storage shed in the back and some raised garden beds for taking care of some of those plants, experiencing that. Another before and after. On the left side, we have this paved space, which is great for vehicles like these wheels that we have here, but there's no shade. It would be really hot on a hot day, and there's not really many nature elements in here. It feels kind of like we're in a parking lot. And so on the right side, we've brought in some shade structures. We've brought in some plants. We brought in some, again, the tree stumps that children can use to balance on. And how many different kinds of activities they have in the space on the right versus the left, which is really organized around kind of vehicle play. So, I'm going to end with just talking about the phases of a facility project. So you saw something today that you're excited about, and you're thinking about how could I bring some of these facility improvements to my space? What comes next? So first is really thinking about your priorities. What's your ability to make some of these improvements? What's your access to funding to be able to pay for them? What's your time range in terms of like immediate versus long-term plans? And how do you go through that? So, we talk about kind of the initial feasibility assessment. So how do you plan whether something's feasible? How much is it going to cost? What's the time that's going to take for you to prepare to do it? Do you have the money to do that, or do you have to find the money? Do you need to work with a team to help you with that? All that goes into the feasibility assessment. Next is, finding the space, site search, doing your due diligence to prepare for your space. The pre-development and construction phase of a project we talk about is when you typically engage an architect if you have to do drawings, and a contractor to be able to complete that work. That could also go through a building permit process and potentially other entitlements that you have to do with the government to get approvals for it. And the last is the project operations and the occupancy of your space. So in the questions to consider each one of these is the feasibility stage, what does it take for you to get ready? Who's going to participate in deciding what your facility plans are? That starts with how much space do you need and what can you afford? Are you going to lease or buy? Or it could be around the feasibility of making improvements in your existing space. and how do you identify what you can afford and your timeline to be able to execute it. For childcare organizations, it's also really important to think about your operations. Are the improvements you're making something that's going to require you to pause programming in the space, programming in the whole building? It's really important for you to be providing care all year round. Then how could you time a project so that it won't interfere with operations, so you won't lose the families that are using your program right now? The next one is site search and due diligence. So where should your space be located if you're trying to do a new facility, and how do you get additional information from people like an architect or contractor to help inform the parameters of your project? The last is in the pre-development and construction phase. So, what's important for you when you're looking at hiring an architect and contractor is about having early childcare experience, working with your community, being able to hire individuals who are from your community, represent your community. What are other experiences that they want to have that would help make them successful in working with you in your project? Really understanding how long it will take. And again, thinking about how that's going to connect back to the operations of your own organization. And then how do you make sure that you're informed about what the budget and timeline is so that you can make decisions that keep your project within your budget goal and within the timeline that you're planning. So I'm going to end there and I'm going to share my contact information. If you have questions about what you heard today around leading practices, about how to plan and execute projects, IFF is excited to work with early childhood organizations to help plan and execute these. So please follow up. I've shared my email here and I welcome questions from anyone who's interested. Thank you.